Hi, this is Amanda de Cadenet, and I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to me and the conversations I'm having, and most importantly, if you want to support this podcast, the best way for you to do it is to sign up for my Substack. That is where I share the more personal lessons I'm learning, extra wisdom from my guests, plus the tools I'm gathering from the various teachers in my life. The way you get access to all of this is by heading over to www.amandadecadene.substack.com and just sign up. Put your email in. It's totally free. So head over to www.amandadecadene.substack.com. Hi everyone, I'm Amanda de Cadenet and welcome back to The Conversation. I'm thrilled to be sitting down with actress and advocate Brittany Snow and Jaspre Guest. They are the co-creators of the September Letters. The September Letters started as an online platform when people could share handwritten letters about their mental health journeys. It is a truly beautiful and powerful project that has now been turned into a book. It is filled with real life stories and expert advice to help anyone struggling with their mental health to feel less alone. In this episode, we talk about their sweet friendship, their own mental health journeys, the impact of the September Letters, and why being vulnerable is the bravest thing we can do. It really is.
All right. Thank you both so much for doing this.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I don't generally talk to people when they have a book out or a film out because I want to talk about something other than just their project. But when I saw what this book was about, I was really excited because I think this is so needed. What has the response been to the September Letters?
It's been really great. I think that everybody feels that there is a collective need for connection right now and to share what we're all going through. I think a number of years ago, a lot of people struggled in silence, or there was a stigma around, oh, you're going through that and you're going through that, but we can't all understand. And now I think a lot more people are feeling vocal about needing to make it normalized. And I think that that's what September Letters has been doing, is just opening up a conversation and making it not so weird to feel like it's okay to struggle. You don't have to have it all together.
Yeah, that's the truth, isn't it? So I want to talk a little bit about how you came to create this book, because it originates from both of you, right? Can you talk a little bit, Jaspre, about what the origins are?
We didn't really mean to write a book.
Those are the best books. We did not mean to do this, but it happened.
It was a happy accident. It was really supposed to be a journal, and then it morphed into this book. But, Britt and I have known each other for a really long time. And what we didn't mean to do was build a platform and to have a community. And I think that word is used so loosely, community, but in our sense, to have a space that people can talk about things that you can't really talk about anywhere else. That I feel like this. Do you feel like this? Oh, you feel like this? Well, maybe I feel like how you feel, and having that validated and having that space. And so the book, really came out of the need of, hey, we should have something physical that people could write in. And then our publisher saying, I actually think that this is more of a book because you guys have so many letters, and a culmination of that.
And what have you seen be some of the benefits of people being a part of that community?
I mean, it's kind of amazing. And I think for Brittany and I, we really didn't know what to expect when you work on something. And you know this, when you have an idea and it's really just the two of you alone working on an idea, and then you bring it out into the world, there is a moment of, oh shit, I wonder how people are really going to use this tool that we built. And that's the point. Here's the tool, go do it. And to see the response, and we have a tab on our platform called Request a Letter. And the letters that we get asked for, like, I have autoimmune, I am closeted, I have all these different ideas or thoughts. And that is something that we were hopeful that we would have, but we weren't sure would actually happen.
And on those Request a Letter tab, basically you can say, this is something that I'm struggling with. I feel really alone in this. Can someone write me a letter and make me feel connected to this shared experience? And it's been really beautiful. And I think the thing that makes us feel so honored to do this is that when people write back to those strangers and say, you got this is what I did, this is what you're going to go through, and these are the feelings, and you're safe and you're loved. And just that sort of understanding, that universal feeling of togetherness is so heartwarming and touching that people take the time out of their lives to share their own experience to make someone else feel better.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of why I started this series, The Conversation, and 10 years ago now, was to connect women through shared experiences. So, but Britt, you have been advocating for mental health for a long time. This is not your first project focusing on mental health. Why is this a subject matter that is so important to you?
I think when I first was going through my mental health journey, I felt, because I was a teenager and I felt really alone and I didn't really have the resources or the understanding to understand that this was something that a lot of people were going through. And I think for me, what I found with myself, I get really in my head. I ruminate, I obsess, I am extremely obsessive about needing to fix something. And I've had this since I was a teenager. And so I never could understand or control what was happening to me. And I'm still like that to this day. And what works for me the best is talking to someone else and even having that breath of like, oh, there's someone else that is here in this universe with me going through this sort of similar thing. And I feel like mental health back in the day didn't really have that breath, that connection. So I always wanted to do something along the lines of bringing people together. And so I guess selfishly, I wanted to do it because it's the thing that I most needed for me. And hopefully other people need it as well.
When we talk about mental health, it is such that encompasses so much, right? And as we know, it is a spectrum from the very mild to the very extreme. And when you talk about your own mental health journey as a teenager, what I heard you describing was, I'm not a doctor. It sounds like OCD, which I relate to. I was like, oh, this sounds really familiar, what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, especially back in the day before, this was such a normal conversation, a lot of OCD tendencies got really misconstrued with other things being, an obsessive compulsive person. And it's very tied to eating disorders too, which I struggled with when I was a teenager. And I didn't know that was a mental health thing. I just thought, well, everyone sees it as a vain thing. But really, it was about, if I can control this thing, then I'll feel safe in this world I can't control. And I feel like OCD is, as many people with OCD know. So I think that having that conversation now is so important, because back when I was a teenager, I was completely confused why I was doing these things. And there was no context for idiosyncrasies that I was trying to do to help myself.
Yeah. How did you find help?
Originally, when I think I was about 15 or 16, I started asking for help from my parents and from my friends. I luckily had the first love of my life, puppy love, boyfriend, who, when I was 16, really helped me in terms of getting me books and taking me to a therapist and things like that. And so I think I just started asking, which was, I think now looking back, kind of cool that I was young enough to know to do that.
Yeah. And that's kind of the first step, isn't it? Something's up. You're like, something's not right. And then getting to the point of asking for help. And Jaspre, I love in the letter from you in the book where you're talking about part of your own journey. And I know for me, it's really hard to contextualize an entire mental health journey into a few pages. It's a lifelong process and commitment and ongoing thing. But I love that you shared some of the kind of tools and solutions and things that helped you. How did you two connect on each of your mental health journeys?
We've been friends for a really long time. And I think one of the first things that we probably bonded over is just our love of helping other people. We both really want to help people. And
Introverted nature.
Yeah.
At the party, and we were both off to the side, like, do I have to get in there? Like, can I just...
We were like hiding. We were hiding from the party that we both needed to work at. And then we just really love helping people, but in a way that is not always out there. I think there's a trend right now that people are helping people and they have to post about it. And that's not why we're helping people. I've been with Brittany for a really long time as a friend, and I've seen the impact that her story has made. And we both have had different mental health journeys, and everyone has their own little different story. And I had a very different experience because I had a lot of physical problems as a kid that manifested into anxiety and panic when I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even realize I had anxiety and panic. And it started to bleed into problems as I became an adult. And it wasn't until I found hypnotherapy, which we both have a shared love for, that I started to realize, oh, this is what this is. Here's a tool that can help not solve it, right? I don't think you ever solve it, but manage it. And that was something that was really transformational in my life, was that one tool. And it started a whole domino effect. And it's something to this day, I still do hypnotherapy. That's something that really helps me. And I think it's about people finding what works for them. I don't think everything works. What works for me is going to work for you, but it's just trying to figure out other options that could be available to you that maybe you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, it's choices. I appreciate what you said about people helping people and then posting about it. I've been raised in recovery since I'm 22 years old, and a big cornerstone of my recovery is being of service. And it's service that nobody knows about.
Right.
That for me is at the center of everything I do creatively and personally. I look at with the lens of, how is this of service to people? How is this giving people more than what they showed up with?
Right.
And I think it's actually a great tool. Being of service is a great tool for my mental health.
Yeah.
I consider it one of the most valuable tools I have.
Mhm.
And I look at for myself for being of service under the lens of, this is not going to help me necessarily. I think a lot of people look to help people if it offhandedly comes around to help them. And
Most people.
I'm being kind.
I know you are.
All right. But for me, it's like, how can I really help someone that really, it can't help me back? But obviously the act of service fills me up. And I'm so grateful to be able to do that. All my friends know that. And I'm always an open line. I'm always trying to help someone. I always try to connect someone. If someone needs something, what can I help you with? Do I know someone over there? Because just that little help does something for someone. It boosts them. It gives their aura a boost because they feel like someone cares. And we're in a very uncaring world at the moment. And that's something that's hard for me to operate in. So, which is why I go into the lane of, how can I be of service?
Yeah. When you listen to people sharing their mental health stories in a public capacity, of which many people have done over the last few years, and it was like you said, Britt, that there was a lot of shame and stigma around mental health. And then people's publicists sat down with them and were like, okay, we need to work out what nonprofit you're aligned with and what your mental health journey is. But my feeling is, if someone's going to share it and be willing to let people know what their experience is, I would love to hear more about the real reality of what it is like to have a mental health crisis. Because there is a pandemic of people in a mental health crisis. And I think we're doing people a disservice by giving them the sort of Instagram version of it a lot of the time. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, unfortunately, the distinction between the two, between the attention seeking of, these are my problems, I'm a victim, and here is my story so I can gain some sort of feeling of altruism in a way, like I'm just sharing my story and so I'm so great. And then also the need to be able to connect to people in a way that makes you feel like I'm giving somebody hope because I've also gone through it. It's really a hard fine line. And I struggle with it a lot of times. And I talk to Jaspre about this all the time of like, is this attention seeking? Is this grandiosity? Is this...
Now, what's your intention? What is your intention? And really checking the motives.
And that's so hard because sometimes it gets a little muddled when you're doing a charity. And I've been involved with mental health for so long. I don't want to harp on my story. And I don't want it to be this sort of thing that fuels who I am or what people know me for or what I know myself for. And I think I remember listening to this podcast a couple of months ago where she was like, you need to stop telling the story to yourself that you're this type of person, that you've come through the fire of all these terrible things. Like, yes, that happened to you, but there's so much more to your story than it being all the things that have happened that were wrong. And I think mental health needs to start looking at the things that have also done that have been right. And it's not just also a sob story. It is the crisis, but it's the coming back up through it that I find really interesting. And I think that's more important than harping on the negative about what.
Well, you're talking about the solution, right? I have a rule where I do not interview people when they are still in the crisis. There have been people over the years that have been offered as guests that are in the midst of some kind of epic crisis, public crisis. And I've said, I don't think that that is fair. I wouldn't want to interview someone while they're still trying to navigate a very difficult situation. What I'm interested in is speaking to them in a few years from now when they are able to share the wisdom and the insight and the solution, because that is what is really, that's what I'm interested in. You know,
the perspective, because sometimes I feel like we might not have the solution. It's an ongoing process.
Yes.
Sometimes I learn things where years later I look back and I think, wow, I thought the solution was that. And then I thought it was that. And then I thought it was that, but it's not.
It's actually this.
Perspective on the fact that it changed. And it was so all over the place in a way where I feel like there's many solutions, but you don't really know until you have some perspective on the whole thing. And so I do think that that's important to at least have the taking yourself out of the storm a little bit and understanding the perspective of what you were really trying to go through and what was really happening, as opposed to the buzzwords and the big story. Like, what was actually emotionally going on for you that you needed to navigate?
What I see from where I sit and my experience with mentoring young women as well as having teenage kids is that there is a huge shortage of therapists and really effective help. When you really break it down, the quality of the help is not as it could be. Mm-hmm. And I've spent quite a lot of time around inpatient facilities, mental health inpatient facilities for various reasons, and have often been really shocked at the approaches that are taken with people who are in a mental crisis.
I agree. I think especially with social media, there's ways of doing the shorthand a little bit. And although it's really lovely that it's available and you can get the little nuggets on your Instagram or phone or TikTok or whatever things that you need for the day, but really if you're going to do the work, those little snippets of validation or those rushes that you get when something connects with you is not the thing that substantiates the long haul of recovery and mental wellness. For me, I have to do it as a practice and I have to find what works for me and do it as something that I believe in.
And as Jaspre said, what works for one person may not work for another. It's really about trying things and seeing what works for you. You know, I recently became aware of a test that is a urine test that will give psychiatrists a deeper understanding of someone's brain chemistry. And I was astounded that that was not mandatory before prescribing somebody medication. And I thought that was really interesting. Why is this not mandatory? Because prescribing medication is still like a needle in a haystack. There's such little diagnostic tools. And yet it is without our brains, which is our mental health, we have nothing.
Mm-hmm. God, that would have saved me a lot of years. Wow, that's really interesting. I'm going to try to research that as well, because I do think it's so important. And I also think that, therapy, it's like dating almost. You have to find the right psychiatrist, psychologist in a way that understands you, your brain chemistry, and all the things that you've gone through before. So they're not just labeling you something because it sounds good in a book. People are so layered. I don't want to be labeled as one type of thing. There's facets of me, and I have to find the person that understands the intricacies.
That's really difficult. I'm sure you've both had this experience where you've spoken to people who have said, I tried therapy, it didn't work. I tried meds, it didn't work. I tried meditation, it didn't work. And, I believe them. I'm like, I hear you. And for me, I have always felt on my own journey and with people I speak to, I have always said, you have to keep trying. If DBT didn't work, try CBT. If that didn't work, try psychotherapy. If that didn't work, try a life coach. If that didn't work, it's so hard when you're having a mental health challenge to keep trying and keep looking and not getting help and trying things and feeling like you're failing.
And Jasper and I always talk about this too, which I think is really important for us with September Letters and the book, is that we're also talking about a group of people that are, yes, seeking and needing to find help, but there's also more likely than not, I'm right along there with therapy is expensive. Everything that we're talking about, all the modalities are very expensive. And I don't want to pay the money that I pay to do all this shit.
Oh my God. The biggest expense I have is my emotional well-being.
And although, I have to remind myself that that makes everything else possible in my life, it is not available for the majority of the people in the world. And I am so lucky that I have a job that allows me to take care of my mental health. But we want to make things accessible to where if you can't afford to go to therapy, which is understandable, there's other ways that you can help yourself and feel connected to the people around you and get those little articles and pages and letters that therapists are actually doing and speaking of. And so that's what a huge part of the book was, is having those experts be a part and having your little therapy session without you having to pay money.
I love it so much. I mean, really, I don't even know how I heard about this, but I emailed Jasper right away. I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting and so needed. And I think it really felt like what I had wanted to do with the conversation, which was to interview experts in all these different fields to do with self and to share that wisdom with people that didn't have access to paying for that kind of a support. And I was just so excited that there was something out there in the world that could connect people through their experiences and stories, because I think it is so important. Jasper, I want to talk about finding your magic.
I had a very unconventional childhood. I was born in LA, raised in LA and New York, which was very bizarre. When I grew up, I had parents, they were very just free loving and really, there were really no boundaries. They were like, you can go to college, you don't have to go to, it was just really an entertainment family and creative and very spiritual. So I was raised as a very young child, since birth, to believe in angels and lighting candles and talking to your guides. And that was
you are so my kind of woman.
Very
I knew that, but I really know that.
Very normal. But I quickly learned how abnormal that was. What has happened in social media where everyone under the age of 25 is an astrologer, self-taught, with the crystal balls and the tarot, was not happening when we were all growing up. It was like the girl who had very pale skin, who didn't belong. My name rhymed with Casper. I was a very strange child and I owned it. I didn't care. I don't know how I had that. My parents just really instilled it in me. So anyway, I've always believed in the metaphysical, and it's become an obsession. And actually, to pull it back to mental health, so that we don't have a whole episode on metaphysical, it helped me find out. It's helped me find out who I am.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times the problem is, and I remember being a teenager and people being like, you need to find out who you are. And I was like, I know who I am. What do you mean? Like, I'm me. But actually, you really don't. And the more life keeps lifing on you, the more you lose.
That's the best quote. Jasper, that is going to be our pull quote. It is so good. The more life keeps lifing on you. Yes.
It just doesn't stop lifing. Every day I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, this has got to stop. So it's been helpful to find out I'm a Gemini. I do a million things. I need to focus. My mom used to say to me as a kid, instead of doing 8 subjects at once, why don't you try to do 1? So it was really, finding your magic is really about finding yourself and finding your core and finding out who you are and why do you do certain things. Because I really do believe that you do certain things based on your astrological chart. My therapists are also psychics and tarot card readers and spiritualists, because it helps give me validation on what I already know, because we're all psychic. When I feel a little bit like the floor keeps falling out, validating what I should do, but I already innately know that, which helps my mental health. And so that's been another huge tool in my life that I was very blessed, I guess, to have it as a kid to help on my journey of lifing.
You've probably heard about probiotics and the importance of a healthy gut microbiome. Well, I've got some news for you. Over 15 years of research on the vaginal microbiome have revealed that our gut isn't the only part of our body that thrives on an optimal microbiome. For years, Seed has been my go-to for improving my family's gut health, so I'm excited that Seed has launched VSO1 Vaginal Symbiotic. Your period, exercise, diet, sex, this can all mess with your vaginal microbiome, making it sensitive to imbalances and unwanted, uncomfortable issues. And I don't need to tell you that there's nothing worse than feeling like something is off with your vagina. That's why I'm so into Seed's VSO1. It's the first vaginal probiotic suppository designed to nourish your vagina with the essential biome it needs to flourish. I've read the research and I've interviewed the scientists behind VSO1, and I've decided to give my vagina the attention she deserves. If you want to check it out, please go to seed.com/Amanda C and use 25 Amanda C for 25% off your first month supply of Seed.
So how are you making this accessible, or how are you sharing your ideology with people through Fighting Your Magic?
So
Or is that still shaping?
No. It's a website. I also write for a lot of websites because my biggest thing is, why do we have to make metaphysical scary? Why is weird music play? Why do we get like voodoo doo 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 doo? Why is it always like poltergeist? Why is it a dark room? Why is it misrepresentation?
Yeah, trying to normalize it.
Like, it's very normal.
Yeah.
And actually, kings and queens were like, hey, when should we go to war? When should I do this? When should I do that? And it's just, why is it still? And to this day, I know this can be a very controversial subject. When I talk to people who are in the metaphysical community, I find like how you find fascinating talking to people that way, I find fascinating. There's still a stigma.
Yeah, there is.
There's a huge stigma. And there are like really ridiculed or not given the proper whatever because they are who they are.
I know.
So it's a really interesting thing. It is a website. It does all the things, and it's really about demystifying.
Demystifying mysticality. Yeah.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
And I think the thing that's really cool with Jaspre in general, with me and her being one of my best friends, is she always relates it back to metaphysical things, which is not where I come from at all. But what she just said is very true. The advice that she gives me that's based on metaphysics is always something that I already knew. And then it hits. And then I have those like little tingles that run up your spine of, oh, I already knew that. And actually you saying it, maybe I can take that leap of faith that was so hard to take. And I think that metaphysical stuff in general, the stigma behind it is that there is that leap. There's that sort of, well, we don't know it scientifically 100%, even though there is some, scientific proof to it. But most of the time there's not. And so it's taking that leap of faith that you actually do know the answer. And that's really hard for people because they want proof.
Well, and also, unlike Jaspre, most of us are raised in a culture where we are taught to not trust our intuition, instincts, and that we're taught to look outside of ourselves always for the answer, as opposed to everything that we've spoken about here today are, for me, tools that help bring me back to myself and connect me to myself in order to ultimately make decisions about whatever it is I need to do.
I also think we're all empaths, right?
Yes.
And this is what Brittany and I talk about. When something's happening, am I picking up on world shit? Am I picking up on my friends?
Yeah. Whose is this? Is this mine, or where is it from? Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, what's going on in astrology today? Oh, okay. Well, this is why I'm feeling like this. And it makes me feel a little less wild and out of control. And I can take control of the car, which is my body, and put it back in the lane and not have it like freewheeling and understand. For me, if I understand why something's happening, I can handle it.
Yes, it makes sense.
When I don't have the explanation, like, why did you just break up with me? I don't understand. I'll be sad for 5 years. If I know why you broke up with me, okay, I can move on with my life.
But we can't do that either because sometimes we're never going to know. And
I need to know, Brittany. This is what I need to know.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things is having resolution and acceptance and closure without the other person giving you the information. Yeah, it's one of the toughest.
I mean, just people in general, we want to have some solidification of our own feelings of, okay, this happened and I can control this feeling because now I understand. More often than not, I feel like you're never going to get the full picture anyway. And so there's sort of that understanding that you're going to have faith in the not knowing. I remember when my ex-boyfriend broke up with me and I had no idea really why. This is back 10 years ago. The mantra that I kept saying is, it's okay. I don't know. And I don't know. It's okay. I don't know. And I don't know.
One of my favorite quotes by Rilke is about, and I'm not even going to paraphrase it, I'm just going to say that it is about learning to live the questions. And that has been so key because I also want to understand something. Like I'm a researcher. If I can understand why, then I can make sense of it. And learning to live with the question of, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not clear. I don't know. And to be able to live in that space is so vulnerable and so scary. But that is so much of life. Can I ask both of you, have you learned how to differentiate between an intuitive thought and fear?
I read something a couple weeks ago about this, and I'm going to butcher this. It's the knowing that's really in your soul and your core instead of like the heady sort of fuzzy, tingly nervous system feeling.
Interesting.
But I don't know. Sometimes that's really hard to tell because my nervous system is fuzzy all the damn time.
Yeah, I was going to say, for those of us that have dysregulated nervous systems. What about you, Jaspre?
I mean, I love that question. I think that that's such a powerful question because I think a lot of what people feel is fear. And I love that distinction. And I really love Brittany's explanation, honestly. I think that makes a lot of sense. For me, intuition, I get it at the weirdest times when I'm not really thinking about what to do. It just like, I get a download, I get a hit. It kind of just goes anywhere. And the fear thing, and that's why I feel like what Brittany's saying is really validating for me, is that loop. It's like when I'm looping, that's when it's fear. And when it's more clear, it's exactly what you just said when I think about it, Britt. When it's clear, it's more intuition. It just comes in.
Yeah, the conversation in your mind is not going back and forth.
Yeah.
The two voices are not being like, well, that could happen. And then the other voice is like, no, that would never happen. And then this one's like, no, maybe it, like that thing. Or maybe that's just me.
No, it makes a lot of sense. That's resonating with me too. Is there a time where you have not listened to your intuition and how it did not work out well?
How much time do you have? Yeah, like so many times. My specialty is like maybe, screw it. Let's just try it. Like just whatever. Like,
right.
Yeah. I knew that. I knew that from the moment it happened. Lately, this is public knowledge, so it's not very personal, but I've been single for a year and change now. And dating is really where it comes up the most.
That's great.
I know from the moment, but then there's the
rationale kicks in. It's like, well, maybe, and maybe it wasn't, and I could, and what if that? Yeah. The negotiating.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah. How about you, Jaspre?
I mean, I think we all have done it. I don't think there's one time in my life that I feel was like, oh, that was a mistake. I think negotiating is something that you're not sure where the fear and the intuition gets intertwined. I'm always like, should I give this a shot? Am I being to this? Should I try that? Should I do this kind of thing? I read something the other day and it was like, and this is so true. If you wish that you hadn't done one thing, it's that sliding door thing. It changes your journey in a way. And so I wouldn't want to change anything that I didn't listen to. I'm going to share a really weird story that just came to my mind.
Please. Aaron.
I went single to junior prom, which was really, I guess, revolutionary and badass to go by yourself.
Oh, yeah. You are even more my kind of woman.
At a certain point, some poor guy was like, do you want me to take you? And I was like, no, I'm going to go by myself. It's fine. And so for senior prom, it was on my birthday. Okay. And I wasn't dating anyone. And the guy that I really wanted, a girl had asked before, it was drama. So I was like, I don't think I should go. And my mom sat me down and said, you're the type that if you don't go for the rest of your life, you're going to think, what would have happened if I went? And I looked at her and I was 17 and I was like, you're right. I got to go. Because if I don't go, I'm going to think about it for the rest of my life. I didn't go to senior prom. Even though junior prom was like, eh. And I still think, why did I go to senior prom? But I don't have the wheel of, well, what if I had it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the intuition. And then it's like, but I knew I shouldn't have gone. I went anyway.
And how was it?
I went with a friend who was very nice and I left early and I went home and I had cake by myself on my 18th birthday.
Oh my God. Yes.
If it was just senior prom and it wasn't my scene and I'm an empath and I was like, I got to get out of here. How fast do I get out of here?
I never went to any proms and you do just fine. Like who cares?
I mean, I grew up in England. They didn't have prom, but I was in juvie and I never graduated high school. So, that was my story. Okay, Jaspre, I'm curious whether this stage of your life with putting this book out and maybe being more forward facing than you're used to, because your career, you've been behind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now this has put you a little bit more forward facing. You're choosing to talk to me today. And I'm sure you've done tons of other stuff. Was that in your chart? Was that in your, either in your, any?
Oh my God. This is the best podcast.
Was that in your Enneagram, your human design, your Kabbalistic astrology reading? I want to know.
Every astrologer said, oh, you're going to write a book. And I was like, a book about what? I'm not going to write a book. That was always in my chart.
The writing.
I never asked like, hey, am I going to be forward facing? Because I have to tell you, this is what is in my chart. And it's so funny because an astrologer who I love just did my chart 6 months ago. And he said, it's really uncomfortable for you to be in front of the camera. And I was like, yeah. He goes, it's in your chart. You don't want to be this. And I always tell friends, if I had really thought about what, Brittany's a friend of mine. I don't think Brittany as Brittany Snow. It's just like, Brittany, it's fine. And when she asked me to be her co-founder, I was so touched and like grateful. And I just wanted to help. But if I had really thought about it, I might not have been forward facing. I might have been a private co-founder because it's a lot. We both have full-time jobs. We like to say this is our side hustle. And I have a different job that's not this. And
no, I know you do.
It's very different. So in my chart, it did say I was going to be a writer, which I write professionally as a career, but I never thought I'd write a book. So that was in my chart.
Interesting.
In your chart, also, there's things that are cool. I have this in my chart, and it might not be the specificity of the exact thing, but it's the journey of it that you are supposed to be more forward facing in your life because eventually you will grow out of the that sort of.
Maybe I never asked. I guess I should ask. I mean, what did your chart say? Because you've been doing this since you were a kid.
Well, I've had things like that in my chart where it's like, that wasn't necessarily it wasn't the thing that was right, but it was the feeling. It was the energy of this new thing happening that I was like, oh, that's what that was about. Like writing a book, or my latest reading said something with documentaries. You're going to do a documentary. You're going to direct a documentary. And I was like, there's no way I will direct a documentary. That sounds like the worst idea ever. And I shut it down. And then a couple of weeks later, we started the journey of, I'm going to be producing a documentary with you. So I think it's tangential to, it's more of the feeling than the actual.
Interesting. What is the documentary about?
Well, we're trying to turn September Letters, the book, into a visual sort of device where we have these stories come together with experts and you can actually see people's letters visually in real life.
Have you looked at Letters Live? Have you looked at that as an event?
Yes, we have. And that's sort of what we want to do in accordance with the show too, is having these things called living letters, where we have these people actually tell their stories, and then eventually having events where we would have those people read them.
Yeah, I really like that. Don't get me started on creative ideas. Okay, so Britt, I want to talk to you about the film that you have written and directed. And can you tell me a little bit about what that story is about?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote this about 5 years ago, and it sort of ebbed and flowed and became something else. But it's about an experience that I had in my early 20s when I was about 21. I met a guy who became my best friend, and he really helped me through my mental health struggle at that point. And it's a love story in a way of, I wanted to tell a story about the most altruistic type of love, which is knowing that you are trying to help someone, but maybe the help they need is to not
be with you.
Yeah. And I think that in recovery and mental health and things like that, those acts of service, I think some of the most meaningful and revolutionary things that happen in your recovery are the people that help you and then say, okay, now you're going to do it by yourself. And I didn't see many of those stories when I was going through it in terms of in film. And so I wanted to do a movie about that type of love and how that's sometimes just as meaningful as the partners you have forever.
When you talk about that type of love, is it a platonic love?
I think it's both. And I hope I nailed. I'm not going to say that I did or not because it will be up to the viewer to decide. But I think it's a muddled feeling because I think it's platonic and romantic in a way of being attracted and chemistry and all that stuff. But sometimes you're meant to have it serve as a friendship. And sometimes the lines get blurred.
Oh, yeah, I have one of those too. Okay, does this story talk about your own mental health journey?
It definitely started out like that. And then when I put the pieces together within the film with actors, with my producers, specifically with my main actress, Courtney Eaton, who is fantastic and won the only performance award at South by Southwest. She is unbelievable in it, but she came with her own set of understanding with her mental health journey. And I won't speak to that. That's her story. But it really infused a lot of what the character became. So it wasn't always my exact autobiographical story.
Wow. I really want to see that. How do I see that?
Well, it will be coming out soon. I can say that it comes out March, April now, which is
amazing. Please let me know when I can see it and whatever I can do to help support that as well. I think there need to be as many stories as possible told through the female lens of this kind of an experience.
I agree. And I think it's a very specific lens. Obviously, it's a very specific issue that's sometimes polarizing and a lot of people don't get. But I do think the love story and that type of love when you're in your early 20s hopefully is universal.
My last question is, do either of you know what your Enneagram number is?
Oh, yeah.
What are you?
I'm a 4.
You're a 4. What are you, Jaspre?
I'm an 8.
Oh, I'm an 8 too.
I knew that.
You're an 8. I'm an 8. And you're a 4. Okay.
So funny. I did a movie last year and I always subscribe to an Enneagram number to build the character. And
Really?
Oh, I love that. Oh my God.
Wow.
It's so easy now to create a well-rounded, very full character because you have all of the details of the Enneagram. And so I did this movie called The Good Half, and I made her an 8. And I know all about you now. This makes so much sense. It's going to be so helpful.
My fellow number 8, Jaspre. I'm so excited to know you're an 8.
This makes so much sense.
Why am I so happy about this? I'm so pleased that we got to chat today. And thank you both for taking the time. I know time is the most valuable commodity. And I want to thank you both for sharing your stories with the conversation community. I know people are going to love listening to you both.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you so much for listening to that fantastic episode. Please like, subscribe, and all that business. It does really help the podcast. And most importantly, come join me on Substack. Substack is where I'm showing the video of the entire episode that you just listened to. So find me on Substack if you want to dig in a bit deeper to the subjects that we talked about in this episode. See you there.